started, are there any questions over the homework? What we're looking at today is more factoring. We're dealing more with factoring. Factoring these quadratics, these polynomials. So whenever we look at this here, this one here, 7x squared minus 31x minus 20, first thing we're looking for is the greatest common factor. Is there a greatest common factor, a number that, or term that will go into all three? So that means we'll move on to our second step, our two sets of parentheses with three spaces. From there, we move on to find the sign. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Here, the sign of the third term is negative, so our signs are opposite. One's going to be positive, one is going to be negative. Our fourth step is to find the factors of the first and third term. Our first term here is 7x squared. Now the x squared part still works the same as yesterday because the only things that multiply together to give us x squared are x and x. Now what's different from yesterday is now we actually have a number in front of x squared and value for our a term. And that is 7. Now what are the factors of 7? 7 and 1, 1 and 7. Are there any others? No. So we just need to put the 7 and 1 in front of x. Since there's only one, we're just going to stick them in. So we'll put the 7 in front of one of the x's. We technically put one in front of the other. We don't necessarily have to write it. Our third term is 20. Now there's a few more factors of 20 because we do have 1 times 20, but we also have 2 and 10, and 4 and 5. Which one of these do we want to try first? We can try 2 and 10, then we'll go to 1 and 20. And we check these here. So 7x times negative 10 is negative 70x. 2 times x is plus 2x. And negative 70x plus 2x is negative 68x. So those aren't quite the factors that we want. Now we can switch the 2 and 10 and say 10 and 2. And try again. 7x times negative 2 is negative 14x. 10 times x is plus 10x, giving us negative 4x. So 10 and 2 didn't work. So what do we want to try next? 4 and 5. 4 and 5. And we'll try this again. 7x times negative 5 is going to be negative 35x. 4 times x is plus 4x. And negative 35x plus 4x is negative 31x. Is that the middle term we wanted? So these are our factors. So these here are the same as what we did yesterday, but the big difference is that instead of having just x and x, we have a number in front of one or both. Questions on this here? The process is the same. It just takes us a little bit longer with checking because it's not as easy to see how it's going to work out. We have to do some multiplication with it. Let's look at this next one here. 2b squared plus 17b plus 21. Is there a greatest common factor across these three terms? No, so we move on to our second step, our two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Here, the sign of the third term is positive. So the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which is also positive. So we'll have plus and plus. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Doesn't matter which one we look at first. If we look at 2b squared, well, the b squared term, only factors for it are b and b. Factors of 2 are 1 and 2, 2 and 1. Really doesn't matter where we put it at this point. We're going to stick a 2 in front of one of them, 1 in front of the other. So we get 2b and b. Questions on this so far? Now we need to find the factors of 21. 1 and 21, 3 and 7. Which one do we want to try first? 3 and 7. Which one is going with the 2b, the 3 or the 7? We'll put the 7 in the other spot. And again, we're checking to make sure we do have the correct factors. We're trying to see if we get 17b. Now, 2b times 7, 2 times 7 is going to be 14b, positive 14b. 3 times b is going to be positive 3b. And 14b plus 3b is 17b. Is that the middle term we wanted? That's it. We're ready for the next one. Seven x squared minus 45x minus 28. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? No. Now 7 and 28 have a common factor of 7. Because 7 goes into both, yes, but 45 does not. So unfortunately, we don't have a greatest common factor. So we'll have our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. The sign of the third term is negative, so the signs are and positive. Because if the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. If the third term's positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. Now at this point here, we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Well, 7x squared, we're going to have x and x for x squared, and the factors of 7 are 1 and 7. So we just need to stick the 7 in one of the two spots. We also need to find the factors of 28. Well, 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 4 and 7. Yep. 3 doesn't work, unfortunately. But 4 and 7, yeah. I think that's what you were thinking, yes. Which one of these do we want to try first? So 2 and 14, 4 and 2 and 14. Which one do we want to put first? 2, 14, and we can check this here. So the first thing we're going to do is 7x times 14, which is going to be 98x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x, giving us 96x. All right? Okay. Because we could switch the 14 and 2. This one here is not going to work. Now, there's one way we can tell without checking it. Because if we look at that first set of parentheses, 7x minus 14, is there a greatest common factor there? 7. Was there a greatest common factor to begin with? No. So there can't be one in either set of parentheses. Now, if you're setting them up and you realize no matter how you set it up, there's a greatest common factor keeps showing up in one of the parentheses, look back at the top. There might be one. Or it might not be factorable. So let's try 4 and 7. 7x times 7, 49x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x, giving us positive 45x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Well, yes and no, because it is the correct number, but it is the wrong sign. So to fix the sign, we do what? Switch the signs. Telling us that the correct factors are 7x plus 4 times x minus 7. Because if we ever get the correct number for the middle term but wrong sign, flip the signs. Now, it is possible to get the correct answer from this here without switching the signs. But to do that, we would first have to change, we have to switch the x and 7x. We have to flip them and flip the 4 and 7. So if we want to leave the signs alone, we have to switch everything but the signs. I think it's easier to just flip the signs than it is to switch everything but the signs. So 7x plus 4 times x minus 7. Questions on these here? Is this really any different than what we did yesterday? No. So we're going to skip the 5p squared minus p minus 18. Because if we did this, 5p, p, yeah, these should be the factors. Yeah, if we factored it, we would get this here. But I want to look at this one here. Now this one here, the reason we're looking at it is a little different. It's not a whole lot, but it's a little different than what we did so far. Now there is no greatest common factor between these three terms. So we'll have our two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Here the third term is, or the third term sign is negative, so the signs for our factors are opposite. One's going to be positive, one is going to be negative. Now if we look at the factors of the first term, 10m squared, well the factors of m squared are going to be m and n. Now 10 is going to be 10 and 1, 1 and 10, or 2 and 5. This is the first one where the first term actually did have more than one set of factors. Doesn't change anything, but we have more factors to look at. Now between these two here, 1 and 10, 2 and 5, which one do we want to try first? 2 and 5. Now let's look at the factors of our third term, 9. We have 1 and 9, or 3 and 3. Which one of these factors do we want to try first? 1 and 9. And we can check this here. 2m times negative 9, 2 times negative 9 is going to be negative 18m. 1 times 5m is going to be plus 5m, giving us negative 13m. Is that the middle term we wanted? We can switch the 1 and 9. 2m times negative 1 is going to be negative 2m. 9 times 5m is going to be 45m, giving us 43m. Is that the middle term we wanted? Okay. All right. Now we can switch the 1 and 9 for 3 and 3. Two m times negative 3 is going to be negative 6m. 3 times positive 5m is going to be plus 15m, giving us 9m. Is that the middle term we wanted? No. Well, the next thing we could do is switch to 3 and 3. It's just going to give us the same thing. All right, so what can we switch next? Because we can switch out the 2 and 5 because we've tried every combination of 2 and 5 with 9 because 2 and 5 and 1 and 9 didn't work. 2 and 5 and 3 and 3 didn't work. So 2 and 5 is out. Where do you want to put the 10? First one. And since it's already set up, we can go on and try this here. 10m times negative 3 is going to be negative 30m. 3 times m is going to be plus 3m, giving us negative 27m. Can't switch the 3 and 3, but we can replace it with 1 and 9. Where do we want to put the 1? Where do you want to put the 9? 1 first, 9 second. Because 10m times negative 9 would be negative 90m. 1 times n is going to be plus m, giving us negative 89m. Switch the signs because we got the correct number but wrong sign. Telling us that 10m minus 1 times m plus 9 is the correct set of factors. So again, especially when we start getting more factors with the first term, third term, it takes a minute to try to see where we're at. Where is the correct set of factors? Questions on this here? Questions on anything we've done so far? All right. Do you feel kind of comfortable with this here? It's kind of coming back to us. Yes? All right. We're going to skip this one here. We're going to look at this one here. Yes, sir. Yes. 28n to the fourth plus 16n cubed minus 80n squared. First thing we're looking for is the greatest common factor. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? 8 might be, I would say 8 for 16 and 80. But 8 does not go into 28. 4. 4 will definitely go into 28, 16, and 80. That is our greatest common factor with our numbers. What is our other greatest common factor? What else goes into all three terms? Because there is something that all three have in common. N. Yeah. N. Because we have what? N to the fourth, n cubed, and n squared. Because up to this point, we haven't had too many where we had a variable, but there is a variable in common with all three, yes? How many n's can we take out of each term? 2. Because the first one has n to the fourth, it has 4 of them. The middle one has n to the third, 3 of them, and the last one has n squared, it has 2. So we can factor 2 n's out of each term. And again, when we factor something out, really what we're doing is just dividing each term by that amount. So we can factor out 4n squared from each term. Now when we factor 4n squared out of 28n squared, 28 divided by 4 is going to give us 7. And when we divide n to the fourth by n squared, we take 2 n's away from n to the fourth. We're left with n squared. Plus, when we factor 4 out of 16, 16 divided by 4 is 4. And when we remove 2 of the n's away from n to the third, we get n minus 80 divided by 4 is 20, yes. And here the n squareds factor out completely, because n squared divided by n squared would be 1, just telling us that we have negative 20 times 1, which is just negative 20. Giving us this here. And at this point, we can go on and factor. So we'll have our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since the third term is negative, our signs are what? Opposite. One's going to be positive, one is going to be negative. Now we need to find the factors of the first term. Well, 7n squared. We have n and n for n squared. And the only factors of 7 are 7 and 1. So we'd have 7n and n. Factors of 20. 1 and 20. 2 and 10. 4 and 5. Which ones of these do we want to try first? 2 and 10. Matter which one we want to put first? 10 first. 2 second. And again, we can check this here. We're trying to get a middle term of 4n. 7n times negative 2. 7 times negative 2 is going to be negative 14n. Positive 10 times n is going to be plus 10n. And negative 14n plus 10n is going to be negative 4n. So we did get the correct number, but again, we got the wrong sign, so we just need to flip the signs. Telling us that our final answer is 4n squared times 7n minus 10 times n plus 2. So we're still able to factor, we just had to pull out that greatest common factor to get there. Questions on this here? All right, guys, we're going to do this one and one more. So let's look at this one here. 3b cubed minus 5b squared plus 2b. Is there a greatest common factor across these three terms? B. All three do have a greatest common factor of b. We can factor that variable b out. Because if we factor the b out of 3b cubed, we're left with 3b squared. And we factor a b out of 5b squared, we're left with 5b. Plus, when we factor the b out of 2b, we're left with 2. Now at this point here, we'll move on to our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now since the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. So we'll have negative and negative. Now we're going to look at our factors of 3b squared. Well, the b squared factors are just going to be b and b. And the only factors for 3 are 3 and 1, so we just have to put the 3 in one of the two places. Now the factors of 2. Well, 1 and 2. Where do you want to put the 1? Where do you want to put the 2? Let's see here. 3b times negative 1 is negative 3b. Negative 2 times b is negative 2b. Negative 3b minus 2b, negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5b. Questions on this here? Yes. Questions on either so far? We're going to look at this one here, the last one we'll look at for today. 30n squared b minus 87nb plus 30b. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? B. Is there any other greatest common factor? I think there is. 30, because 30 and 30 are the same number. So we're really looking at a common factor between 30 and 87. 3. Because 3 will go into 30, for sure. Now the question is, will it go into 87? 87 divided by 3 is? So here the greatest common factor between these three terms is 3b. Thank you. Now if we factor 3b out of 30n squared b, well, 3 factored out of 30 would be 10. We still have the n squared, but the b factors out completely. Yes. We factor the 3 out of 87, as we just saw, we're left with 29. The n is still there, but the b factors out completely. Plus, when we factor the 3 out of 30, we're left with 10. And again, the b factors out completely. So really that b term factored out of all three terms completely. So we still have the 3b as part of our factor. But now what we're focused on factoring is n squared minus 29n plus 10n. Now here the third term is positive, so the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. So we'll have negative and negative. Factors of our first term, 10n squared. Well, the n part will have n and n. 2 and 5, 1 and 10. 2 and 5. Now the other, guys, the third term is also 10. So we have 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 5. Which one goes first? 5, 2. And we can check this here, and we're trying to get negative 29n. 2n times negative 2 is going to be negative 4n. Negative 5 times 5n is going to be negative 25n. Guys, questions on this here? All right.